parts of Wales as well, although cloud amounts will come and go through the night. Then as we go into Sunday, that fog could again persist across some parts of the country, especially through the Midlands and northern England. That's where we could see it lasting all day. Where it does, temperatures will stay close to freezing, but away from that, it'll be just that little bit colder. As we go into next week, stays grey for many, a few sunny spells and cold. Bye-bye.
Canary Islands sponsors the weather.
You're watching GB News live across the UK and the world on our digital stream.
GB News is Britain's news channel.
We are the UK's home of discussion and debate from all perspectives.
We are here for you. Don't forget to join our YouTube community by clicking on that subscribe button.
And if you want the GB News app, you can click and catch up on programmes anytime.
We love to hear from you, so email us.
gbviews@gbnews.uk.
Thanks for being part of the GB News family.
My name is Andrew Doyle. Join me every Sunday evening at 7 p.m. for Free Speech Nation. This is a show where we address current affairs and news stories of the week with the help of two wonderful comedian panellists. I brought in comics because I want to give it a lighter edge, and also they work for less. See you there.
Join my show Farage, 7 p.m. till 8 p.m. Monday through Thursday, and there you will get opinion, analysis, debate, and I'll cover stories that nobody else dares to touch. And then for the last 15 minutes, talking pints. We're over a drink. We have a civilised conversation with someone. We very often disagree, but we do it in a grown-up way. Come and join me on Farage.
I'm Colin Brazier. I've reported from more than 70 countries around the world, covered wars from Afghanistan to Iraq, from Lebanon to the Balkans. I'm trying to bring that experience, that feel for events, to the studio. And something else. I'm ready to give an opinion. Today's stories with a spark. Brazier from 8 p.m. weekdays on GB News.
Good evening, I'm Alistair Stewart. Coming up on the show, the Lib Dems say they burst Boris's bubble in the by-election. But in truth, within the Tory party, was it already going flat? Is a 3.8% rise in rail fares the best way for the government to kick off the fight back? And will it drive more of us back into our cars? And breaking news, the Archbishop of Canterbury doesn't like lying, especially when it comes from those who lead us. All of that still to come, but first, a full news update with Karen Roberts.
Thank you, Alistair. These are your latest headlines. The Prime Minister says he takes personal responsibility for the Conservatives' defeat in the North Shropshire by-election. Boris Johnson's comments come after the party lost a seat that it held for almost 200 years. The Lib Dems candidate, Helen Morgan, won by nearly 6,000 votes. The by-election was triggered by the resignation of Owen Paterson after he breached lobbying rules. He had a 2019 majority of almost 23,000.
Clearly, the vote in North Shropshire is a very disappointing result, and I totally understand people's frustrations. I hear what the voters are saying in North Shropshire, and in all humility, I've got to accept that verdict.
Police have confirmed the 4 young boys who died in a house fire in South London were home alone. In a Facebook post, the 2 sets of twins, aged 3 and 4, were named by their grandfather as Leighton, Logan, Kyson and Bryson. A 27-year-old woman has been arrested on suspicion of child neglect.
At 7 p.m. last night, we were called to reports of a fire in a residential property. Officers responded to the incident alongside colleagues from the London Fire Brigade and London Ambulance Service. As has been confirmed, 4 boys who were inside, 2 aged 3 and 2 aged 4, were bought out but sadly died. They were all related. There was nobody else inside the property at the time of the fire.
2 teenagers have been convicted of the manslaughter of 18-year-old Hussein Chowdhury in Walthamstow. Video released by the Met Police shows Hussein and his family grappling with one of the attackers. He had come to their home under the ruse of buying a designer jacket Hussein had for sale. During the struggle, Hussein suffered a fatal stab injury to his neck. Marvin Ward and Alexis Morris, both 18 and from Ilford, will be sentenced next year. The First Minister of Wales is now urging everyone to meet outdoors and to take lateral flow tests before attending social gatherings. It follows the announcement that tougher measures will be introduced from December the 27th, following a surge in the Omicron variant. There'll be a return to mandatory 2-metre social distancing in offices, and nightclubs will be closed.
We've been dealing with the Welsh Government and their caution for some time now, and we thought we'd done enough to not be picked on again, like some weakling in the playground. But once again, the bully boys have moved in and started kicking us.
In News Just In, Cabinet Secretary Simon Case has recused himself from leading an investigation into alleged parties in government departments during lockdown. That's following reports that gatherings were held in his own department. And we'll have more on that story in an hour's time. Well, you are right up to date. Now, back to Alistair.
Karen, thank you very much. Like many in my trade, I have a fascination with by-elections. They can be caused by all manner of things like scandal, abuse of position and, of course, even death. For a brief period, they totally dominate the political landscape. The headlines are the easy bit. X dramatically snatches victory. Y hangs on against all the odds. And Z comes from nowhere to recast the political landscape. In truth, few, if any, are remembered by the public, even a few months later, let alone a few years later. They distort everything and are usually great fun. The claims made before the vote and in the wake of the declaration, however, linger a little longer. We will break the mould of British politics and go back to your constituencies and prepare for government, for example. But today's "We've burst the Boris bubble" is perhaps a little more interesting. A bit of context about by-elections, leaders and the prospects of their parties. When Labour were in deep trouble under Michael Foot in the late 1970s and 80s, it took the SDP to change them. In 1982, Glasgow Hillhead fell to the former Labour grandee Roy Jenkins in SDP colours. His was one of many transitory but important victories that eventually prompted the Labour Party of Michael Foot to change. From the drama of Neil Kinnock taking on the hard left to the revolution of Tony Blair's New Labour, it was the SDP, as much as anything, that brought all of that about. You might ask where the SDP are now, but that's actually not the point. Eastbourne in 1990, a by-election caused by the murder of Margaret Thatcher's friend and ally Ian Gow, brought nearer the end of the Iron Lady herself. It signalled a growing disquiet with her leadership, not just in the party hierarchy, but even in the South Coast home counties. It provided grist to the mill of her cabinet enemies, and within a little time, she too was gone. And Wirral South in 1997 helped put the limping government of John Major out of its agony. It cost him his slender majority and heralded the general election that saw Tony Blair sweep to victory and go on to govern for a decade and more. So, what of North Shropshire? We are less than 24 hours from the declaration and the analysis continues apace, but a few things already seem clear. The truth of last night's high drama and shootout at the North Shropshire Corral is that the Lib Dems did well for two reasons that have nothing to do with the Lib Dem manifesto. The Tories left the goal wide open and Labour, in effect, stood back. The venom dripped on the Tories in a pretty low turnout was real, and Boris Johnson was personally the magnet for much of it. This was not a demand for a Liberal Democrat government, but a public kicking for Boris Johnson. That too is what Labour wanted. Second, last time out, they played it low-key, seeing the Lib Dems having a much better chance of delivering said kicking. And many unhappy Tories just stayed at home. What was surely on the ballot paper was the charge sheet against Boris Johnson. He'd stood by Owen Paterson, the man whose resignation had caused this by-election. Paterson had been found guilty of rule-breaking over lobbying, and the Prime Minister stood by him. Many, including Tories, simply didn't like that and let Johnson know on the floor of the House of Commons and in the lobbies. It added to a general air of cronyism and favours for friends. Parties, gatherings and all the rest of it from last Christmas have also dragged him down. That they happened appalls many. That they were denied appalls them even more. Simply none of it looks good, and ordinary folk voted accordingly. Senior Conservatives tonight talk of him drinking in the Last Chance saloon, telling it was time to get a grip, even saying that North Staffordshire was a referendum on his performance. The former leader Ian Duncan Smith called for calm, but also focus. Quotes, "I want my colleagues to stop playing games. The party has to get behind him. But for that to happen, Mr Johnson will have to become what he was when they embraced him, a winner who stood for what they stood for." Remember, Boris Johnson was elected in 2019 with a huge majority to get Brexit done, not to raise taxes and to control public spending. He hasn't fully got Brexit done yet and is increasingly seen on his own side as a high-taxing big spender, even if the coronavirus is a reasonable defence. He's also seen as too green and a man too comfortable with trimming our civil liberties in the fight against COVID. Votes in the House of Commons earlier this week demonstrated that loudly. With inflation rising sharply, especially fuel and energy, and the economy slowing worryingly, the challenges mount. There's a growing body of opinion within the Tory party that they want a leader who is competent, a person of integrity, but also pledged to cut taxes and spending and not fixated with the green agenda. They also want someone who sees the Tories as the defender of all civil liberties and freedoms, not as a party that too easily infringes them. If Boris Johnson can be that person and can rediscover those tenets of Tory faith, I think he can survive. If he can't, then that by-election may just join the long list of by-elections where the winner isn't the story, but the catastrophic impact such results can have on the loser. Well, to discuss all of that, my first guest tonight's Wera Hobhouse, Liberal Democrat MP for Bath and the party's spokesperson for climate, emergency, energy justice, women and equalities, and is also shadow leader of the House. We've got one more Lib Dem to join you, so maybe you can share some of those responsibilities. It's great to see you. First question, straight to the chase. Did your party do a deal with Labour?
We were not doing a deal with Labour. We stood as Liberal Democrats and we won a stunning victory on our own feet. So that's what the result has shown. Deals are something that people discuss. Deals come about because we've got a voting system that is first past the post, which we have criticised for a long time. We are dealing always as a third party with questions around, do we do deals? No, we are Liberal Democrats and we can win elections.
Tim Farron talked about Helen Morgan's 6,000-plus victory as bursting the Boris bubble. In your view, was Tim talking about the bubble in the Tory party or the bubble in the country?
Well, both probably. I'd say, first of all, the Tories are clearly very, very uncomfortable now with Boris Johnson. He was seen as somebody who just can't do anything wrong and win elections. But also, particularly, I think the bubble is burst with the voters. They were very, very unhappy with his performance, with clearly the way he just jokes about very serious issues. He doesn't seem to be competent. And people want leaders that are competent and honest. And clearly, the voters in North Shropshire don't think that Boris Johnson is either. So they have given him a very clear signal that they're not happy with his performance. So it's very clearly the voters who have burst the bubble.
But you know a lot about these things, and you've studied it over the years. I mean, Bath has been a seat in the past that's gone this way and that. Either he's going to change and survive, or if the Tories, who are ruthless and brutal in these matters, and I quote senior Tories in saying that, then he'll be gone, someone else will be in, and that by-election seat will just be forgotten because it'll be back in Tory hands in 23 or 24. You know that's the real truth, Vera.
Well, predictions are always an interesting thing to do, but who knows what's going to happen in 2 years' time. A lot of things can happen. The Tory fortunes have changed dramatically in the last 2 years, so who knows when the next election is going to be and what the political situation looks like. Lots of Liberal Democrats who got voted in by-elections actually stayed on, like Simon Hughes, for example, in Bermondsey, and have proven themselves to be excellent constituency MPs, and therefore people have understood what Liberal Democrats deliver for them as good, community-minded MPs who are not detached, and the public has come to like Liberal Democrats, and there's a good chance that Helen Morgan will follow that in those footsteps of those successful MPs who won a by-election and held on to their seats.
We shall watch with enormous interest. Vera, thank you so much for breaking into your Friday evening to spend time with us. Thank you so much. That's Wera Hobhouse there, the Liberal Democrat Member of Parliament for Bath. I'm delighted now to be joined from the other side of the House by Sir Charles Walker. Charles is the Conservative Member of Parliament for Broxbourne, but is also Vice Chairman of the Conservative 1922 Committee of Backbenchers and a former Chair of the Procedures Committee. A been there, cares about standards sort of man. Charles, great to see you. You must have seen this coming, but did the scale of the defeat shock you?
So, Alistair, I don't think I've got anything to add after your brilliant introductory monologue where you summed up the travails of the Conservative Party so eloquently. I was asked by a journalist colleague of yours if we were in the Strangers Bar yesterday, and he asked me, where do you see this ending up, Charles? I would have said, if we win by 1,000, I won't be surprised, but if we lose by 1,000 or 2, I won't be surprised either. So I was slightly surprised by the scale of the loss, but I knew it was always in the balance. It was one of those seats that, given the 12 weeks the parties had, that looked like it could go either way.
To turn it round personally, and I come to the party and some of the stuff that Vera and I talked about there, and indeed you and I have talked about before in the past, the consensus seems to be that if Boris Johnson can stop the gaffes, purge the Muppets, tell the truth and get more Tory again on the economy, he can survive it. If he can't, he's done.
I think he's got a hugely difficult challenge over the next 6 months with Omicron, more calls on the public purse to rightly look after the hospitality sector that's suffering again. But Alistair, he has made a number of unforced errors, mistakes over the past 8 to 12 weeks, which we can all do. I mean, being Prime Minister is a fiendishly difficult job. But I do maintain he's still got much more right than he's got wrong. Sadly, what's happened over the last few weeks has overshadowed the really big decisions he's got right, starting with ordering hundreds of millions of doses of vaccines, through to the timing of the summer unlocking, through to the booster programme. So I still think the big things he's got right.
Are his instincts still truly Tory? His economic instincts above all else?
I think it's very difficult to be a Conservative in the sense of cutting taxes and doing what Conservatives like to do when we're in uncharted territory with COVID-19. We've had furlough initiatives, perfectly understandable and justifiable and rather fantastic, but we've borrowed £430 billion. I just think people have to be realistic about what a government can do. We've also, as you know, Alistair, we've got inflation running at 5%, which is another tax on incomes. This is an extraordinary vice that the economy is and household earnings are in. Sorry, both the economy's in and household earnings are in. And I'm sure all the things he'd like to do and that Rishi would like to do are now very difficult to do.
But I'm just going to press you that because it is a nuance, sure. And I accept that. But my point specifically was not force majeure, which the coronavirus most certainly is, but are his instincts, and you know him quite well, are his instincts still essentially Tory, or are they sort of liberal Tory?
Oh, look, I think Boris is a Conservative, but there are various flavours of conservatism, and I think he is on the liberal end of the Conservative flavour. But of those flavours. But look, he is the Prime Minister. He's had an extraordinarily difficult time. Sometimes he drives me wild. I mean, as you know, I'm often in a different division lobby to the Prime Minister. He can drive me to sort of the very end of frustration at times. But really, the idea that there's someone better out there, that this is somehow an anathema, that a Prime Minister, whoever he is or she is, has a difficult time, I just think that is unrealistic. All Prime Ministers have difficult times when the seas get really, really choppy. The question is, can he navigate himself and the party out of those choppy seas over the next 6 to 9 months?
You said elsewhere tonight that to have a leadership election now would be self-indulgent. But given that choppy waters and getting him through this and reasserting what you believe to be his instinctive core beliefs, how long has he got to do that?
Look, I think he's got a year plus. Alistair, you interviewed me during the sort of terrible time in the run-up to the defenestration of Theresa May. You know it doesn't happen overnight. To get to Theresa's resignation in May, it was 6 months of trench warfare. I don't think, given the challenges facing this country and families, they would ever forgive the Conservative Party for getting into those trenches and actually having a civil war amongst each other. I just don't think that's on the cards for a very long time. And I do genuinely believe the Prime Minister can turn it around. Do I approve of everything he does? Absolutely not. Do I think his instincts in the main are good and decent? Yes, I do.
Is one of the other brutal truths, Charles, that at the moment there isn't a single candidate around whom the majority of the Parliamentary Conservative Party could unite?
Well, I mean, I don't go around looking at potential candidates. I look at the Prime Minister that we have. And I think anybody pushing themselves as a candidate, however subtly at the moment, is misreading the mood and the mood of the party. I think the party is serious about wanting to get the country back on its feet, wanting to get businesses back on its feet, wanting to finally say goodbye or get Omicron and COVID-19 back in its box. And I think anybody who regards this as a time when the Prime Minister's clearly in difficulty, as a time to advance their own cause, is doing themselves a disservice, the party a disservice, but most importantly, the country a disservice.
Message received and understood loud and clear. Finally, would you agree with me, and I put my little neck on the line a little bit in saying it, but I say it because I genuinely believe it, that post the reshuffle, Labour is now beginning to look like they are getting their act together. And I quote, just as one example, Wes Streeting responding to Sajid Javid just 2 days ago in the House of Commons, saying the right thing, not playing to the gallery, offering support where it's appropriate and criticism where it's equally appropriate. They're looking a little bit more of a serious threat to you than they were 12 or 18 months ago.
Alistair, I'm less generous than you on that. I think Labour is utterly ruthless. Labour has quite brilliantly set the narrative running that it was Labour votes that got the Prime Minister's Plan B through. Of course, you and I know, because we're anoraks and we're in the business, that Labour could have sat on its hands and the government would have won a majority 2-1. It would have had about 225 in its lobby for the regulations, with 100 of us rebelling. And Labour's been quite brilliant at positioning itself as having saved the day for the Prime Minister, which of course it didn't do at all. But look, that's politics, and Labour's playing a much harder and better game than it's played for many years.
Charles, great to talk to you. Thank you very much indeed for your time. Have a great weekend when it finally starts for you. Charles Walker there, Sir Charles Walker, Member of Parliament for Broxbourne. And I'm delighted to now welcome to the programme a keen observer of the Conservative Party. He was a member of the party, but left. He was even an advisor for Boris Johnson, but not for very long. He created Conservative Home, which to me is the most influential Tory Talk Shop, and he now writes quite brilliantly for Reaction. Tim Montgomery, a very warm welcome to you indeed. You have been up, I think I'm told, for at least 36, if not maybe even 48 hours. So if I see you nodding, I'll shout. Boris Johnson faces disquiet with the electorate, not only in this by-election, but also from within the party. Electorate first. Can he cure his problems and win back the affections of the electorate?
Well, Alistair, it's lovely to be on your programme, and hopefully, despite a lack of sleep, I can make some sense. Yes, I think he can. I think it's going to be difficult. I personally didn't go to North Shropshire, but I talked to an awful lot of Tory MPs and activists who did. And quite remarkably, compared to the general election victory 2 years ago, where he was such an asset to the Conservative Party, without exception, people told me that people were moaning about Boris Johnson in various ways. They couldn't believe what he said. Is he focused on the job? Why has he got all these ethical issues, etc., etc., etc.? I worry, I haven't concluded, but I worry that a reputation has now formed around Boris Johnson that is very negative. And while the British people are forgiving about individual indiscretions, and that's why I don't think we saw immediate poll reaction to some of the controversies like the redecoration of the Downing Street flat immediately, once they've seen repeated sort of transgressions, they take a firm view. They don't tolerate that in public life. And I fear if Boris Johnson isn't at that point, he's close to it.
Fascinating, because I always thought, and I've covered him going right back to mayoral times when I was working for ITV in London as well as on the network. And one of the great truths always struck me, and I found it almost incomprehensible, was virtually anything that he did, they would forgive him. Yeah, but it's Boris, that's Boris. That has changed. I don't think the misdemeanours have necessarily got any worse or any better. They're still the same sort of stuff. But for some reason, suddenly, enough is enough. Can you fathom that?
I think it's partly what you were just discussing with Charles Walker, Alistair. These are incredibly serious times. When you are Mayor of London, it's an important job, but it's not leading your country through Brexit. It's not leading your country during a pandemic. It's not leading your country when Russia might be about to invade Ukraine. And there is a sense, and I shouldn't just say it's a sense of people in North Shropshire and elsewhere, I have it too. Is Boris Johnson focused enough on the job? And what Charles Walker just said about the country wouldn't forgive the Conservative Party if they got rid of a leader when they need the leader to be focused on finding answers to our challenges, he's right. But, what if that leader isn't capable or willing, or a combination of both, of rising to that challenge of crafting solutions to the big problems we face as a country? I don't know the answer to that question, but the fact that I'm asking it so publicly on your programmes, I hope, suggests to you and to your viewers how worried I am that the answer to that question is that he isn't up to the job and to the challenges we face.
Up to getting Brexit done in sunny uplands back in 2019, but it's a different world now. Point taken, and a very, very important one as well. Shift you to the second part of my introductory question, and that, to me, this is really the profound one. For the party, and you've articulated it more strongly perhaps than many, but others like our mutual friend Ian Martin have also said it, he has lost it economically. He is not a Conservative anymore on tax nor on spend. You've even called him a con-socialist.
I don't think I've done that, but I've come probably close to it. I think the problem is, compared to Margaret Thatcher, Margaret Thatcher suffered enormously unpopular midterm election results, and people are comparing what we've seen in North Shropshire and in Cheshire and Amersham with what Mrs Thatcher experienced. The big difference between the two is that Mrs Thatcher did really difficult things at the start of her parliaments. It's what the best prime ministers do. They enact unpopular legislation. They take on vested interests, and that causes short-term opposition. But you hope that the bet that they make is by the time of the end of a 4 or 5 year parliament, the hard yards that you put in will start to bear fruit. And so that's the absolute relevance bullseye of your question, Alistair. What has Boris Johnson done on tax reform or making the state more efficient or reforming various public services that'll actually begin to see benefits in the minds of voters at the next election? And I fear the answer to that is not enough. And even before the pandemic struck, flagship projects like Levelling Up were to say, were sketchy, and Mrs. Thatcher wouldn't have allowed that.
No, I totally 100% agree with that. Let me stick with your analogy and play with it just for one final question on that, and then I've got a final question for you, as it were. If some senior figure or even someone like
Alistair, he's always got a final point in his sermon.
Back in the days of Thatcher, if someone who worked for her, like Matthew Paris or John Whittingdale, brought along this fellow, tall, stocky fellow with slightly fluffy blonde hair, for quite a senior post, and Margaret Thatcher said yes, but the key question is he one of us? Would they be able to say yes of Boris Johnson today in 2021? He is one of us.
Well, look, I don't know. Charles said that there were different flavours of conservatism.
I think it's more than that.
I honestly not quite sure fully what the Conservative agenda should be at the moment. But this is the thing I do know. This is one of my big takeaways from today, is people who've never considered even voting Liberal Democrat voted Liberal Democrat en masse in North Shropshire yesterday. 2 years ago, they gave the Tories a thumping majority. 2 years before that, they almost put Jeremy Corbyn into power. Just before that, they voted for Brexit against all the political wisdom. Trump has been elected. All over the world, the great continuity is that voters are saying we want change. And that is the responsibility of those that really seek to lead. What is it that is making voters so restless at the moment? And I would like to see the Conservative Party thinking really deeply about what that means for reform of the state, ensuring that people who've been thrown on the scrap heap in the middle of their lives because of industrialization and globalization, what does that mean for our people, our fellow citizens? And I just don't see that level of thinking going on inside Boris Johnson's government. So what kind of conservatism it is, is probably the secondary question. It's the lack of big thinking in response to this persistent populist rebellion that makes me much more worried than whether we can win the next election. I don't want to just win elections. I want to win elections for a purpose and to serve our country.
The last two big changes in our lifetime were Thatcher in 79 and Blair in 97. Thatcher barely heard of, shadow education secretary, I think, before becoming Prime Minister. Blair shadowed a few things and was an impressive parliamentary performer, but not with a CV as long as your arm. Is it time for the party that you were once a member of, but might even consider one day going back to under the right leadership?
I'm a member again now, although Boris Johnson probably regrets watching this interview.
Is it time for them to take a deep breath and contemplate, if not right now, but in the near future, to jump a generation? Interesting when people like Tom Tugendhat's name gets mentioned in the same breath as Rishi Sunak and Liz Truss. Is that time approaching? Jump a generation, fresh start, new ideas, vision?
No, I'm going to appeal to you, Alistair. We've both got quite a bit of grey on our heads. I don't think it is the time for youth and inexperience. I want people who've been round the block once or twice, who know how government works, who know how to take on vested interest. I think Tony Blair would probably be a better Prime Minister now if he was in office. I think David Cameron would be a better Prime Minister than when he started in office. I don't want to emulate China in every way, but the leading countries of the world, they aren't choosing inexperienced, TV-savvy people to be their leaders. They're looking for people who've done the great offices, who know how the systems work and who can deliver change. And so I'm looking for people who have a track record of success to be the next Prime Minister. And for a party that regards itself as the competent grown-up party in British politics, that's how the Conservative Party has traditionally sold itself, we need to put forward a leader after Boris who people look at and think, I trust that person with my money. I trust that person to oversee the nation's public services. And that'll be the person.
Oh, perfect timing. That'll be the person I will support and welcome. I suspect he was going to say, but with... I'm so glad that didn't happen earlier, because I think that was a fantastic contribution to, I hope, your understanding and grasp of what's really going on deep down in the warm soil of the Conservative Party.
Oh, we had a little clip there, did we?
The midline... He's there. Bit it. No. Full stop. Thank you, Tim. Bless you. Because we've got to move on. If we go back, it'll go wrong again. I hate that, and I don't want to lose the point. What I wanted to try and bring you tonight, a little bit of my thoughts, but also the profound thoughts of someone like Tim Montgomery, who's been in, out, advised and guided, and also Charles Walker, who is not a climber of the greasy pole at all, but is a been-there-done-it senior Tory MP. And I hope that helps you understand that that by-election result, dramatic though it was for the Liberal Democrats, and my first guest explained that very, very well indeed, it was about something a lot more profound that's going on within our politics and within the Conservative Party particularly. So my thanks to all three of them for helping me, and I hope you understand all of that. Next, after the UK reported another record number of positive cases, we'll be speaking to a doctor who's on the front line in the fight against COVID. But first, let's bring you up to date with the weather.
It's time to remind ourselves there's always another winter. Canary Islands sponsors the weather.
Hello again. This weekend we've got high pressure in charge of our weather, which brings dry and rather cloudy weather with the risk of some dense fog. And it will feel quite chilly as well. There's not much wind around over the weekend, and that means that fog will be persistent and temperatures will struggle to rise where we do see the persisting cloud and indeed fog. Now, as we take a look through the next few days, you can see certainly through tonight, we've got a lot of fog across some eastern areas of the UK. So fog warning is in force from the Met Office, and that remains in force until midday on Saturday. Elsewhere, lots of cloud overnight. Where we do see some clearer skies, though, for eastern Scotland and northeast England, we could see some frost as we start tomorrow morning. Quite windy, though, across the far southwest. And those winds will be quite gusty for a time across Cornwall. Elsewhere, though, with the light winds, it means that that fog will be stubborn to clear. So for some places, it may not clear through the day on Saturday, staying gloomy and grey. To the west of the UK, some brighter spells are possible. I think the best of any sunshine will be across Scotland. Temperatures struggling, though, for many staying in single figures, maybe just getting to 10 degrees in the far southwest. That's 50 Fahrenheit, but with a breeze, it will feel cooler. And then the fog becomes more widespread again on Saturday night. We could see some fog getting into parts of Wales, southwest England as well. So for some places, grey and gloomy remains the picture for the next couple of days. Some clearer skies, again, leads to a frost across parts of Scotland, maybe northern England, perhaps parts of Wales as well, although cloud amounts will come and go through the night. Then as we go into Sunday, that fog could again persist across some parts of the country, especially through the Midlands and northern England. That's where we could see it lasting all day. Where it does, temperatures will stay close to freezing, but away from that, it'll be just that little bit colder. As we go into next week, stays grey for many, a few sunny spells and cold. Bye-bye.
Canary Islands sponsors the weather.
You're watching GB News live across the UK and the world on our digital stream.
GB News is Britain's news channel.
We are the UK's home of discussion and debate from all perspectives.
We are here for you. Don't forget to join our YouTube community by clicking on that subscribe button.
And if you want the GB News app, you can click and catch up on programmes anytime.
We love to hear from you, so email us.
gbviews@gbnews.uk. Thanks for being part of the GB News family.
My name is Andrew Doyle. Join me every Sunday evening at 7 p.m. for Free Speech Nation. This is a show where we address current affairs and news stories of the week with the help of two wonderful comedian panellists. I brought in comics because I want to give it a lighter edge, and also they work for less. See you there.
Join my show Farage, 7 p.m. till 8 p.m. Monday through Thursday, and there you will get opinion, analysis, debate, and I'll cover stories that nobody else dares to touch. And then for the last 15 minutes, talking pints. We're over a drink. We have a civilised conversation with someone. We very often disagree, but we do it in a grown-up way. Come and join me on Farage.
I'm Colin Brazier. I've reported from more than 70 countries around the world, covered wars from Afghanistan to Iraq, from Lebanon to the Balkans. I'm trying to bring that experience, that feel for events, to the studio. And something else. I'm ready to give an opinion. Today's stories with a spark. Brazier from 8 p.m. weekdays on GB News.
Join us for the Political Correction. We're here every Sunday to correct politics and put you, the people, back in charge.
We talk about all areas of the United Kingdom, including Northern Ireland.
Our debate goes way beyond the Westminster Village. It's about the real country. It's about your opinion. So please, we want you to tell us what you think.
This is the Political Correction.
Every Sunday morning from 10 a.m. here on GB News.
You're watching GB News live across the UK, the world, and our digital stream.
GB News is Britain's news channel.
We are the UK's home of discussion and debate from all perspectives.
We're here for you. Don't forget to join our community by hitting the subscribe button.
And download the GB News app so you can click and catch up on programmes anytime.
We love to hear from you. Email us at gbviews@gbnews.uk.
Thanks for being part of the GB News family.
Welcome back. For the third day in a row, the UK has recorded its highest ever number of COVID cases. More than 93,000 people tested positive in the last 24-hour period, and the Omicron variant has become the dominant strain in Scotland and in London. Earlier today, the Welsh Government announced that nightclubs would be closed and social distancing measures would be introduced from December the 27th, while 5 of this weekend's 10 Premier League football games have been postponed. But as the number of positive tests rises, what is it like for NHS staff trying to treat hospital patients on the front line? I am delighted to say that I'm now joined by Dr. Derek Connolly, who is a consultant interventional cardiologist at Sandwell and West Birmingham NHS Trust, and there he is. Good of you to break into it. I hope, in a sense, it gives you a bit of a breather as well. Cases are going up, but crucially, are you also seeing an increase in hospital admissions?
Alistair, it's still a little early. You know that there is a delay between that initial infection and hospitalizations between 1 and 2 weeks. So you're seeing now this tsunami of cases coming through, of positive cases. What we don't know is what that translates to admissions and, of course, in due course, unfortunately, to deaths. And one of the things that's been massively successful in the last 2 years with the pandemic is research. So now if you come into hospital, you don't die quickly, you stay around, and in many cases, of course, we save your life with all these therapies. But that means the potential for the hospitals to be saturated is enormous, and you've seen the growth day on day. This could be devastating.
Yeah, and because you're a scientist, then the empirical is all that matters to you. It's nothing about, oh, let's maybe this and maybe possibly that. Although South Africa is fundamentally different in so many respects, we do know from there that Omicron appears to cause milder symptoms than Delta. And therefore, your expectation may be allowed to be positive. How long do you think people at your level of your profession can say, we're going to get away with this one?
I suspect we need to watch the next month. I think after 2 weeks we'll have an idea, but I think a month will tell us. If in a month's time we haven't seen an enormous number of hospitalizations, then we'll know we're not going to get that enormous rise in death rate. But, you know, it is possible it could go the other way.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, but a month we've marked down in our mental diaries. You've also said, and I read the lengthy piece that was posted, you have regular pieces put out there on the line, which really, really helps people like us, that 2/3 of the COVID patients in your neck of the woods are unvaccinated. That remains a real and profound problem.
Absolutely. And it's quite clear from all the science that the vaccines work and they protect you. And they protect the NHS. So, you know, the emphasis is we want people to get that vaccination because there is undoubted evidence now that it's not good, particularly at the moment, to be unvaccinated. Now, we do think the Omicron variant may be less the vaccines may be less effective against them, but they're still going to be effective. And anything we can do at this point to reduce the number of people infected, to reduce the number of hospitalizations is a good thing.
And of course, the elephant in the room, and you alluded to it in your first answer, although you're a cardiologist, I imagine that some of your best friends are oncologists and all of the rest of it. The elephant in the room is that growing list of folk who, did we not have coronavirus, would have been in there, being treated by your brilliant teams and being made better. How close to real crisis and bust point are those lists?
Well, to put it into context, Alistair, the FDA said that in North America in 2020, more people died of heart disease and cancer than died of COVID. And we did a press release about a month ago in Europe, effectively saying the same thing. So all of those other diseases that are there are still needing treated. But of course, if you've got everyone at the front door fighting COVID, you can't be fighting heart disease and cancer as well as you should be. So we have backlogs. And that undoubtedly is going to cause death, is going to cause a lot of morbidity. So again, the more we protect the NHS from this horrid virus, the more we protect people with heart disease, with cancer, with all the other diseases we deal with.
Derek Connolly, a real pleasure to talk to you, and thank you very much to you and your teams for what you do for us. We are profoundly grateful. Thank you very much indeed. That's Derek Connolly from the Midlands there, cardiologist, but speaking with great authority on the whole challenge currently facing the NHS. Now, are we losing faith in politicians? The Archbishop of Canterbury says he's disappointed in the people who broke lockdown rules last December. Next, we'll be speaking to someone who used to be the Queen's chaplain.
You're watching GB News live across the UK and the world on our digital stream.
GB News is Britain's news channel.
We are the UK's home of discussion and debate from all perspectives.
We are here for you. Don't forget to join our YouTube community by clicking on that subscribe button.
And if you want the GB News app, you can click and catch up on programmes anytime.
We love to hear from you, so email us.
gbviews@gbnews.uk.
Thanks for being part of the GB News family.
My name is Andrew Doyle. Join me every Sunday evening at 7 p.m. for Free Speech Nation. This is a show where we address current affairs and news stories of the week with the help of two wonderful comedian panellists. I brought in comics because I want to give it a lighter edge, and also they work for less. See you there.
Join my show Farage, 7 p.m. till 8 p.m. Monday through Thursday. And there you will get opinion, analysis, debate, and I'll cover stories that nobody else dares to touch. And then for the last 15 minutes, talking pints. We're over a drink. We have a civilised conversation with someone. We very often disagree, but we do it in a grown-up way. Come and join me on Farage.
I'm Colin Brazier. I've reported from more than 70 countries around the world, covered wars from Afghanistan to Iraq, from Lebanon to the Balkans. I'm trying to bring that experience, that feel for events, to the studio. And something else. I'm ready to give an opinion. Today's stories with a spark. Brazier from 8 p.m. weekdays on GB News.
Welcome back. Increasing rail fares doesn't strike me as the brightest idea for a post-by-election bruising relaunch, but by coincidence, a 3.8% rise from March was unveiled today. But ministers point out it could have been worse. They've gone with July's RPI figure, even though inflation has risen sharply since then. And the prices rise in March. The prices rise in March, not the usual New Year's Day thumping. What's more, they say it cost a fortune to keep the railway going during the pandemic, and investment across the industry is high. Well, I'm joined now to discuss that by Sylvia Barrett, who's the Head of Policy and Research at the Campaign for Better Transport. Sylvia, great of you to join us. I know you feel desperately strongly about the environmental dimension, but forgive me, let me come to that in a moment. I promise faithfully I will. Just want to talk about price first of all. Ministers do say that they've tried to help and improve the railway at the same time, and they don't want other taxpayers being hit for rail users' benefit. Do you concede all or any of that?
We recognise that it could have been worse and that the increase could have been at RPI +1. But that's cold comfort to lots of commuters and people that will need to be travelling coming up. So lots of season tickets will be going up by hundreds of pounds next year. And it will take someone commuting full-time from Brighton to London, for example, a full 7 weeks to pay off for a season ticket. So consumers would rightly be discouraged by this increase, and that's the last thing we need post-pandemic. We need to be incentivizing
but Sylvia, they also want better trains, cleaner trains. We've just seen lovely new rolling stock roll by there, and most people want HS2 done. Why should somebody who doesn't use the railway pay through their tax, and why shouldn't I, who does happily use the railway, pay a bit more?
Well, there's two sides to this coin, of course, and we should compare this to the fuel duty-frees, for example, that has been in place for more than 10 years. So we feel that it's profoundly unfair that people that are choosing the right thing to do and travelling by green, environmentally sustainable ways should be penalised in that way. But the other question is that increasing prices will not increase revenue because it will just price people off. Commuting is a much more discretionary travel now. People can choose to stay at home and not travel into the office. So we feel that an increase will just price a lot of people off and not lead to the increased revenue that the Treasury is hoping for.
You mentioned the environment in passing there, and I promised faithfully I would come to that, because when I read your press notice and briefing notes, I have to confess, between you, me and the people kind enough to watch this conversation, I totally agree with you. I mean, it seems to be bonkers that I pollute if I drive my car, and I pollute much less if I come up to London on the train. Have ministers given you any explanation for why they seem to be in breach of the COP26 agreements?
Well, that is the disappointing thing, because before COP26, we had a strategy that said that the government wants public transport to be the natural first choice for people. And we just feel that the actions are not matching this rhetoric. It's very disappointing that fuel duty has been frozen. Air passenger duty on flights, on domestic flights, will also be cut. Whereas greener modes like bus and rail are having fare increases year on year. Therefore, there's not enough of incentive for people to use those modes. But a train produces 4 times less carbon emissions than a car per passenger journey.
I got it loud and clear. I do hope Grant Shapps is listening or sees you quoted on Twitter as well, because, as I say, I shouldn't probably say it, but it seems to me a slam dunk argument. I disagree with you about the economics at the beginning, but I think you've got a very strong point on the environment. Sylvia, great to talk to you. Thank you very much indeed. Hope you managed to have a great weekend. There we are. Good thoughts there. on the environment. Why put prices up and put people off using something that does make more sense if you believe in trying to fight pollution? Finally, we turn to matters of faith and truth, oddly sparked by the parties that did or didn't happen in Downing Street a year ago and the denials that look, frankly, shakier by the day. The Cabinet Secretary charged with investigating the matter stands accused tonight of having held a party himself and even popping into another one. It's all prompted the Archbishop of Canterbury to say that leaders must put their hands up and acknowledge where things have gone wrong. He added his disappointment over gatherings held by our political leaders during lockdown. Profound stuff. And joining me to discuss it all, I'm delighted that Bishop Gavin Ashenden, there he is. Thank you. Very good of you to join us, Bishop. Bishop Gavin was former chaplain to Her Majesty the Queen, so we don't get much higher than that. Your former boss has declared that she herself has cancelled the pre-Christmas luncheon and will be taking things very, very steadily. That's leadership, isn't it?
Yes, I think it is. I think people look for leadership by example in these difficult times. And government depends on the hypocrisy gap being as small as possible, the gap between what people say and what they do. So Archbishop Welby was quite right in praising the Queen and saying she sets us an inspiring and good example. And I think that's one of the reasons why people love her and that she's gained the trust of generations during her reign.
Sure. Justin Welby, who I've been lucky enough to meet a couple of times, is not backward in coming forward on these matters. Maybe that's because he had a successful active life in the private sector before taking the cloth. But he does occasionally cross the line and is basically saying to the Prime Minister and his closest colleagues, don't tell porkies and don't cover them up, crossing that line.
Yes, I thought he was very good in this interview. He made a distinction between blame and accountability. And as the journalists tried to dig traps for him to fall into, he skillfully avoided them. And I thought got to the heart of the matter in saying what we need is politicians who will be accountable. And most importantly, politicians who won't pull the wool over our eyes and abuse the power that we've lent them, because to do so brings the whole system of democracy and delegated power and trust into disrepute. I thought he offered a very sensible warning on behalf of the nation. It was very well said.
The other thing about it, which I find utterly fascinating, and our first conversation tonight on the programme was about the by-election, what it really means, and promises of this and breaches of that. All of the polls suggest that the Joe and Joanna public out there, who matter more in these matters than anybody at all, simply don't trust any politicians nowadays. I mean, I find that profoundly distressing and depressing. Do you?
I think one of the things that has most upset me during my life is that I was born in the early 50s, is the way in which there's been a slow degrading of public standards. It's not that any of us are naive about what politics is about or human nature. But 20 or 30 or 40 years ago, there was a far higher expectation of personal probity. And when people were found out or made catastrophic mistakes, they immediately stepped down. There's a sense as time has gone by during my lifetime that it's more a matter of what you can get away with. And I don't think you can blame politicians for this. I think this is one of the reasons why I'm a Christian. One of the responsibilities we have is to try and inject society with as much moral fibre as we can, because without it, you end up with a kind of mafia-driven gangster society. So
I'm going to draw the line there, Bishop, because it's such a brilliant turn of phrase. But also we've run out of time. Bishop Gavin, thank you so much for your time this evening. From His Grace and from me, that is it. I'm back at midday tomorrow with an exclusive interview with the Speaker of the House of Commons. Next up is Mark Dolan, but first let's bring you right up to date with the weather. From me, a very good evening to you.
It's time to remind ourselves there's always another winter. Canary Islands sponsors the weather.
Hello again. This weekend we've got high pressure in charge of our weather, which brings dry and rather cloudy weather with the risk of some dense fog. And it will feel quite chilly as well. There's not much wind around over the weekend, and that means that fog will be persistent and temperatures will struggle to rise where we do see the persisting cloud and indeed fog. Now, as we take a look through the next few days, you can see certainly through tonight, we've got a lot of fog across some eastern areas of the UK. So fog warning is in force from the Met Office, and that remains in force until midday on Saturday. Elsewhere, lots of cloud overnight. Where we do see some clearer skies, though, for eastern Scotland and northeast England, we could see some frost as we start tomorrow morning. Quite windy, though, across the far southwest. And those winds will be quite gusty for a time across Cornwall. Elsewhere, though, with the light winds, it means that fog will be stubborn to clear. So for some places, it may not clear through the day on Saturday, staying gloomy and grey. To the west of the UK, some brighter spells are possible. I think the